My name is Claire Whitmore. My husband once handed me a gift that changed my life, not because it was precious, but because it nearly destroyed me. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started the night before his trip. Mark had been pacing in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in that low, clipped tone he used when the conversation wasn't meant for me. I was used to that he worked in international trade, and half his dealings seemed to require secrecy. Or so I told myself. When he hung up, his face had the faintly polite smile he reserved for moments he didn't want me to look too closely at. He walked over carrying a small box wrapped in deep crimson paper tied neatly with a silver ribbon. "I wanted to give you this before I go," he said, his voice too casual, almost rehearsed. I smiled, touched by the gesture but curious. "You could have just given it to me when you get back." He shook his head quickly. "No, I want you to have it now. Don't open it until tomorrow." It was such an odd instruction. I tilted my head, trying to read his expression, but he just stepped forward and kissed my forehead. "Promise me," he added a little too firmly. I laughed to break the strange tension. "All right, I promise." We spent the rest of the evening in a haze of routine, a quick dinner, his suitcase half zipped on the bed, last-minute phone calls. There was no warmth in his goodbye at the airport, just that same polite smile. I told myself he was tired. That night, the box sat on my dresser, its ribbon catching the moonlight through the curtains. I thought about opening it. Curiosity tugged at me, but his voice echoed in my head. "Don't open it until tomorrow." The next morning, I woke to the sound of pounding at the front door. Not knocking, pounding. Sharp, urgent, like a battering ram. My stomach lurched. When I opened the door, I was met with 4 uniformed police officers and a man in a dark suit holding a badge. "Mrs. Whitmore," the suited man asked, his voice all business. "Yes, we have a warrant to search your home." I froze. "For what? What's going on?" He didn't answer. The officers brushed past me, moving with swift mechanical precision, their boots echoing against the hardwood. One of them went straight to my bedroom as if he knew exactly where he was headed. My heart raced. I followed him down the hall, demanding to know what they were looking for. He didn't respond. He reached my dresser, eyes landing on the crimson-wrapped box. Without hesitation, he picked it up and peeled away the ribbon. "Wait. That's a gift from my husband," I blurted, stepping forward. The man in the suit stepped between us. "Mrs. Whitmore, please stay back." The officer lifted the lid. Inside, cushioned in black velvet, lay a necklace, a cascade of diamonds that glittered unnaturally in the morning light. I didn't even have time to admire it before the man in the suit snapped on a pair of latex gloves and lifted it from the box. "This matches the description of the jewelry stolen in the Grant and Levy heist last week," he said flatly. My breath caught. "What? No, that's impossible." "My husband," he cut me off. "Claire Whitmore, you are under arrest for possession of stolen property." The words didn't make sense. They blurred like my brain refused to translate them into reality. I shook my head, backing away instinctively. No. No. There's been a mistake." Cold steel cuffs clamped around my wrists. My hands went numb, my pulse thundering in my ears. As they read me my rights, I caught sight of the empty gift box on the dresser, the red paper crumpled on the floor like a discarded piece of theater, the silver ribbon coiled like a snake. And for the first time in my marriage, I realized I didn't actually know the man I had been sleeping beside for the past 12 years. The air in the house still felt heavy from their presence. Even though they hadn't left yet, I could already feel the invasive fingerprints of authority lingering in every corner, the smell of their leather belts, the sound of their radios crackling. It had been less than 5 minutes since they slapped the cuffs on me, and already my sense of control had evaporated like steam. They didn't give me time to process. Two officers flanked me as they guided no marched me out the front door. My neighbors were outside watering plants collecting newspapers pretending not to stare. I caught sight of Mrs. Daly from across the street clutching her robe tighter as if stolen diamonds might somehow leap from my hands and infect her. "Claire, what's going on?" She called out in a tone that was both concerned and curious, the same tone she used when asking about a recipe at block parties. I didn't answer. What could I say? That my husband had given me a gift that apparently belonged to criminals, that I didn't even know what I was being pulled into. They pushed me into the back of a patrol car, the hard plastic seat cold against my legs. As the door slammed shut, I realized something chilling. The gift box had been sitting on my dresser all night untouched, while I slept peacefully. The diamonds had been there the whole time, and I had been completely unaware. The drive to the station blurred by in flashes of streetlights and half-formed thoughts. My mind kept circling back to Mark's face last night, that polite, distant smile, the way he had avoided my eyes when he told me not to open the box. By the time we arrived, my brain was buzzing with questions I couldn't yet voice. Inside, the fluorescent lighting was harsh, flattening everything into a lifeless shade of gray. They took my fingerprints, my mugshot. I heard the camera click, and it felt like a door closing on the life I knew. Then came the interrogation room. It was smaller than I imagined, almost claustrophobic, a square box with a metal table, two chairs, and a single camera watching from the corner. A man in his 50s entered wearing a navy suit that was rumpled just enough to suggest long hours. He introduced himself as Detective Harris. His voice was calm, almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you know why you're here?" he asked, settling into the chair across from me. I gripped the edge of the table. "You said something about stolen jewelry, but I don't." He raised a hand to stop me. "The necklace found in your possession matches the description of one taken in a high-profile robbery at Grant and Levy Jewelers last week. Do you know how it ended up in your home?" I shook my head quickly. "No. My husband gave me that box last night. He told me not to open it until today. I haven't touched it." His pen scratched against a notepad. "Your husband's name?" "Mark Whitmore." "Where is he now?" "He left for a business trip last night. I don't know exactly where. He travels a lot for work." Detective Harris leaned forward slightly. "What kind of work?" "Import and export," I said, hearing how flimsy and vague it sounded. "Mostly luxury goods. Watches, jewelry sometimes." "Legal jewelry," I added quickly. One eyebrow lifted almost imperceptibly. "And you've never questioned where the merchandise came from?" I bristled. "I'm not involved in his business. I co-own a small jewelry boutique downtown. I sell my own designs and work with vetted suppliers." "That's convenient," Harris said softly. "A legitimate storefront. A perfect place to launder stolen goods." The words hit me like a slap. "No. Absolutely not. I've never." He leaned back, studying me. "Mrs. Whitmore's stolen merchandise doesn't just appear in someone's home without reason, and right now the evidence points directly at you." I sat back in my chair, my pulse pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream that they were wrong, that Mark had set this in motion, but my voice caught. That was when it happened, the slip. Another officer entered with a file and handed it to Harris. "We've got the preliminary connection to Whitmore's shipping records," he said, glancing at me briefly before leaving. "Whitmore. My husband." I caught Harris's eyes, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he tapped his pen against the table. "Let's take a break. I'll give you some time to think about how you want to handle this." He left me alone in that cold, airless room. The longer I sat there, the more my mind spun. Mark's business trips, the vague invoices, the way packages sometimes arrived for him with foreign stamps, but no sender listed. The late-night phone calls in the garage. It was all there. Pieces I'd ignored because I thought marriage meant trust. After what felt like an hour, a female officer came to escort me to holding. The cell was dimly lit, the walls scuffed and scarred with the graffiti of people who'd been there before me. I sat on the metal bench, my hands clasped so tightly they ached. My lawyer friend Olivia was the only person I could think to call. She had handled some difficult cases before, but never anything involving me. When she arrived, her heels clicking against the concrete floor, I almost cried. "They think I'm part of a jewelry heist," I said the second she was within earshot. She raised an eyebrow. "Are you?" "Of course not. It's Mark. It has to be. He gave me that necklace. He told me not to open the box." "Olivia." He knew what was inside. Her expression darkened. "Then you need to tell them everything. Every little thing you can remember about him, his work, his contacts." I hesitated. "If I do that, I'll be destroying him." She didn't flinch. "Claire, he's already destroying you." Her words settled in my chest like a stone. For the first time since the knock at dawn, the fear in me was slowly being edged out by something else, a cold, deliberate anger. And under that anger, a grim clarity was forming. I had to choose between my marriage and my freedom. By the time they called me back into the interrogation room, I had made my choice. I was going to talk. The second time I sat across from Detective Harris, I no longer felt like prey caught in the hunter's snare. My hands were still clammy, my pulse still unsteady. But there was a steeliness in me now, the kind that only comes when fear burns long enough to turn into resolve. He opened his folder eyes, flicking down to the paperwork. "Claire," he said no longer. "Mrs. Whitmore, you told me earlier that your husband gave you the necklace. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And you had no idea it was stolen property?" "None. If I had known, I wouldn't have kept it in my home. I would have called the police." His gaze was unreadable, but I sensed he was measuring the way I spoke, the steadiness of my tone. "Your husband's shipping records," he began, "show connections to multiple consignments flagged by customs for irregular declarations. That's not proof, but it's compelling." I swallowed. "Do you think he planted that necklace on me?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "What I think Harris finally said is that someone wanted that necklace found in your possession. Whether to distract us or to frame you, I can't say yet. But if your husband's involved, you're not the only one in danger." Danger. The word lingered in the air like smoke. "I want to help you," I said, leaning forward. "But you have to help me too. I can't be charged for something I didn't do." Harris studied me for a long moment. "You give me something solid, Claire. Anything that connects him to that heist, and I can start pulling you out of this." I thought back over the last year. The strange, unmarked packages. The time he came home smelling faintly of cigar smoke and expensive cologne, a combination that didn't belong to him. The late-night text he got from someone named G that made him step outside to talk. But the problem was, I had no proof. Just suspicions I'd ignored. Olivia, seated beside me, spoke up. "Detective, my client has told you everything she knows at this point. You can't keep her without charges." Harris's jaw tightened. "Possession of stolen property is a charge." "Yes," Olivia said smoothly, "but you'll have to prove intent. Right now, you don't have that." It was a gamble, but it worked, at least partly. I wasn't free to go, but they moved me from the holding cell to a monitored waiting room while they reviewed evidence. It was a step up from the concrete bench, though the air was still thick with the smell of old coffee and tension. While we waited, Olivia leaned close. "Claire, I have contacts who can dig into Mark's business, off the record. If you're willing to let me, I can start tonight." "Do it," I said without hesitation. That night, as I sat under the watch of a tired officer, I imagined her scrolling through bank statements, shipment logs, anything she could get her hands on. The idea of someone finally looking behind Mark's polished facade gave me a small flicker of hope. By morning, Harris returned. "We're releasing you on bail," he said, sliding papers across the table. "But don't mistake this for freedom. You're still under investigation, and you'll need to surrender your passport." I signed the forms with a trembling hand. The cold bite of the cuffs being removed felt almost surreal. When I stepped outside, the sunlight felt too bright, too intrusive. Olivia was waiting by her car. She didn't waste time. "We have a problem," she said, unlocking the door. I braced myself. Would I traced a payment from one of Mark's shell companies to an unregistered account? The transfer was made the same day as the Grant and Levy robbery. "And Claire, that account's in your name." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I've never opened any account like that." "I know. Which means someone did it for you. And the only person with enough of your personal details to make that happen is your husband." We drove in silence for a while, the city passing in a blur. Every red light felt like a pause for my thoughts to catch up, each one making the betrayal feel sharper. By the time we reached my house, I felt like a stranger there. The front door, the hallway, the scent of lavender from the diffuser, all of it belonged to the life I'd had before yesterday. Inside, I found my phone where I'd left it. Dozens of missed calls from unknown numbers, but none from Mark. Not one. I tried calling him again, but his number went straight to voicemail. "Mark, it's me," I said, my voice shaking. "The police came. They arrested me. I know about the necklace. Call me back. Please." I hung up and stared at the phone, knowing deep down that he wouldn't call. That night, Olivia emailed me a preliminary dossier. It was like reading the autopsy report of my marriage. Multiple offshore accounts, cash deposits far exceeding reported income, shipments routed through countries known for smuggling rings, and scattered among the records transfers into my name, enough to make me look like a willing participant. He hadn't just abandoned me, he'd built the perfect trap. As I sat there, the weight of it all pressing down on me, I realized I was already in a war I hadn't chosen. And wars aren't won by staying silent. If the police needed something to connect Mark to the heist, I'd give them more than they expected. I just needed to figure out where to start. I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet, my mind too loud. Every creak in the walls felt like it could be footsteps. Every shadow seemed like it might hide a truth I hadn't yet faced. By morning, I was wired on nothing but cold coffee and adrenaline. Olivia picked me up early. We had a meeting with Detective Harris. When we arrived at the station, Harris didn't waste time with pleasantries. He gestured to the same interrogation room where this nightmare had first started. I sat down deliberately, folding my hands on the table, trying to project calm, even though my pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. Claire Harris began. "I'm going to be direct. We're looking at a bigger operation than one stolen necklace. The Grant and Levy robbery wasn't a one-off. It's part of a string of thefts tied to an international smuggling ring. And whether you realize it or not, your husband's name keeps brushing up against the people involved." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "I told you I don't know anything about his business deals, but I think I can help you find out." Harris raised an eyebrow. "And why would you suddenly be so cooperative?" I met his gaze. "Because I finally understand that Mark isn't going to save me. He's going to let me burn for something he did. If I don't start talking now, I'm finished." Olivia leaned in. "We've uncovered financial transfers from shell companies tied to Mark to an account in Claire's name, an account she never opened. We believe this was an intentional setup to make her look complicit." Harris's expression shifted, still skeptical, but now interested. "Do you have documentation?" "Yes," Olivia said, sliding a thin folder across the table. Inside were printouts of bank records, shipment manifests, and a rough timeline of the transfers. Harris scanned the pages slowly, his eyes narrowing. "This is something." Not enough to bring him in, but enough to justify digging deeper. I exhaled, a small release of pressure in my chest. "Here's what I need from you," Claire Harris said. "Any emails, texts, phone calls, anything that ties Mark to the movement of goods or money around the time of the robbery. If he's sloppy, there might be traces." That was the thing about Mark. He wasn't sloppy. He was meticulous, almost obsessive. But that kind of perfection takes work, and sometimes people get tired. I told Harris about the late-night call he took in the garage about the packages with no sender about the nights he claimed to be at trade shows, but came home without so much as a brochure. "Write it all down," Harris said. "Details matter even if they feel small." After the meeting, Olivia drove me back home. I spent the rest of the day digging through my digital life, scrolling months of text messages, searching my email for keywords, combing through call logs. That was when I found it. A text from Mark dated 3 days before the robbery. "Expect a delivery Tuesday. Don't sign for it, just leave it inside." Tuesday had been the day before he gave me the gift box. My stomach twisted. It was the kind of message that seemed harmless until you knew what you were looking for. I forwarded the text to Olivia, who passed it straight to Harris. His reply came quickly. "This is good. We can work with this." But good wasn't enough. I wanted decisive. I wanted damning. That night, I went into Mark's office. I'd avoided it since his arrest was only a hope in my mind, but now I saw it as a crime scene. The room smelled faintly of cedar and cologne. His desk was neat, too neat. I ran my fingers along the edges, checking for hidden catches or compartments. In the bottom drawer behind a stack of old invoices, I found a black leather-bound notebook. Inside were coded notes, dates, initials, numbers that didn't make sense until I remembered something from years ago. Mark had once told me about using a trade shorthand for sensitive deals. I photographed every page. The following morning, I met Olivia at her office and handed her the photos. She stared at them, then at me. "Claire, if we can get someone to crack this code, we might have enough to tie him directly to the heist." We didn't have to wait long. Harris had a forensic analyst look at the pages, and within a day, they confirmed what I had feared and hoped for. The entries matched shipment dates for stolen goods moving through specific ports. Every port listed had been used by Mark's company in the last year. When Harris called me back in, there was a different energy in the room. "This changes things," he said, tapping the folder. "It doesn't clear you completely yet, but it's the first hard link we've got between him and the thefts. If you're willing, we could use you to make contact." "Contact?" I asked, my voice tight. "Send him a message, something that will make him believe you're still loyal, that you're willing to protect him for a price. If he bites, we might get him to say something incriminating." It was risky. I knew Mark wasn't stupid, but I also knew his ego. If he thought I was still his, he'd underestimate me. I agreed. That night, with Olivia watching, I drafted the text, "We need to talk." I kept my mouth shut, but I won't keep doing it for free. I hit send. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. "I'll be in touch." It wasn't much, but it was the first response I'd gotten from him since this started. And if Harris was right, it was the first thread we could pull to unravel everything. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. For the first time since the knock at dawn, I felt something close to control, fragile, dangerous, but mine. And I intended to use it. It was 2 days before Mark reached out again. 2 days of waiting, of my phone sitting like a loaded weapon on the coffee table while I tried to pretend life was normal. Every vibration, even from spam calls, sent my pulse spiking. On the morning of the second day, I was in the kitchen, hands deep in soapy water, when the screen lit up with his name. Not unknown, not a burner number. Mark. I snatched the phone so fast I nearly dropped it. "Mark." His voice was calm, too calm. "Claire, I hear you've had a rough week." I gripped the counter nails, biting into the edge. "Rough?" "I was arrested, Mark. In my own home. They found your gift, that necklace, and you disappeared." He chuckled softly, the sound sending ice through me. "You always were dramatic. I told you not to open the box until the right time." I could feel my breath shortening. The right time. There is no right time to hand your wife stolen goods and let her get arrested. "You're fine now," he said smoothly. "They let you out." "On bail?" I snapped. I'm still under investigation. Do you even care what they're saying about me? There was a pause, the kind that told me he was weighing his next move. I can make this go away, but I need to know I can trust you. The words tasted bitter, but I forced them out. You can. He lowered his voice. Then meet me. No police, no lawyers, just you and me. There are things I need to explain, but not over the phone. Everything about it screamed trap, but Olivia had told me to play the part. So I asked the question Harris had suggested. If I'm sticking my neck out for you, I need something in return. He laughed again, low and knowing. Money enough to keep quiet, I said, and a guarantee that this won't come back on me. Mark didn't answer right away. You've changed, Claire. I had to, I said, keeping my tone even. So where and when? 2 nights from now, the old marina. Slip 14, midnight. The call ended before I could reply. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. When I relayed the conversation to Harris, he nodded grimly. This is it. We'll wire you. We can't guarantee he'll incriminate himself, but if he slips, we'll have it. Olivia was less optimistic. Mark's careful. He's not going to say, hey, I planted stolen jewelry on you. You'll have to push him without making it obvious. The next 2 days crawled by. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on a cliff edge waiting for the ground to give way. When the night finally came, Harris's team set up near the marina out of sight. They fitted me with a tiny mic and an earpiece. My job was simple: get Mark to talk, keep him there long enough for them to act. The marina was almost deserted. The water lapped quietly against the docks, the air heavy with the scent of salt and diesel. Slip 14 was dimly lit, shadows pooling between the pilings. I spotted him leaning against a sleek black speedboat, hands in his coat pockets. He looked exactly as he had the night he left, immaculate, controlled, but there was something sharper in his eyes now, like a predator assessing a wounded animal. Claire, he said warmly, as if greeting an old friend. I didn't smile. You wanted to talk. He gestured to the boat. Come aboard, we'll have privacy. I stepped onto the deck, my legs steady only because I forced them to be. Once we were seated, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. 50,000. Enough for you to keep quiet, enough for you to start over. I stared at it, then back at him. And what am I keeping quiet about? Mark's gaze didn't waver. Claire, I didn't plan for you to get caught up in this. But when the police started circling, I had to think fast. That necklace, it was leverage. They'd focus on you instead of me, buy me time to clean things up. My hands tightened in my lap. You used me. I protected you, he said firmly. You were never in any real danger. I let out a harsh laugh. You call being arrested in front of my neighbors protection. His jaw flexed. I call it survival. If they'd gotten to me first, you'd be left with nothing. This way I can fix things. I just need you to hold the line a little longer. Through the tiny earpiece, I heard Harris's voice. Keep him talking. I leaned in, lowering my voice. So the heist? That was you. Mark's smile was faint, almost proud. Not just me. You think jobs like that happen without connections, without planning. The diamonds, the shipment routes. It's all about moving pieces without anyone noticing. He realized a second too late how much he'd said. His eyes narrowed. Why are you asking me this? I forced a shaky laugh. Because I want to know what I'm protecting. If I'm risking everything I deserve to understand it. He relaxed slightly. All you need to understand is that by the time this blows over, we'll both be free and clear. And richer. That's enough, Harris said in my ear. We've got it. Seconds later, floodlights cut through the darkness. Shouts rang out. Mark's head whipped around, and for the first time I saw fear on his face. He stood, but before he could move, officers swarmed the boat. Mark Whitmore, you're under arrest for grand larceny, conspiracy, and possession of stolen property. He turned back to me, betrayal etched across his features. You set me up. I met his gaze, my voice steady. No, Mark. You set yourself up. I just stopped letting you use me to hide it. They led him away in handcuffs, his protests fading into the night. As I stepped off the boat, Harris gave me a curt nod. You did good. I didn't feel good. Not yet. But for the first time in weeks, I felt unshackled. The marina was silent again after the squad cars left, except for the faint slap of water against the pilings. I stood there for a long time, the chill of the night settling into my bones, watching the dark outline of the boat where it had all ended. Mark was gone, but the mess he'd left behind, that was still mine to deal with. Olivia pulled up a few minutes later, her headlights cutting across the empty dock. She got out her heels, clicking softly against the wooden planks, and handed me a coat. You're freezing, she said. I pulled it around my shoulders, but the shiver running through me wasn't from the cold. It was the kind of trembling that comes when adrenaline starts to fade, when the body realizes the danger has passed, but the mind is still catching up. You did it, Olivia said quietly. You got him to talk. I nodded, though the victory felt strange in my mouth, like a word I wasn't sure how to pronounce. It doesn't feel like I did anything. Just pushed him a little. That's more than most people could have done after what he pulled. She glanced at the boat. Do you want to go home? The word landed heavily. Was my house even that anymore? Every corner of it felt contaminated with Mark's presence, the scent of his cologne in the bedroom, the papers in his office, the faint indentation his body left in the couch cushions. We drove back in silence, the city lights blurring past. When we reached my driveway, the house loomed in the dark, too still, like it was holding its breath. Inside, I turned on the kitchen light and just stood there listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The absence of him was almost louder than his presence had ever been. I walked through the rooms slowly, as if seeing them for the first time. The dining table where we'd shared anniversary dinners. The hallway where his shoes were always neatly lined up. The bedroom where that crimson-wrapped gift box had sat like a landmine waiting to detonate my life. I found it in the trash bin, the crumpled wrapping paper and silver ribbon. I pulled it out and held it in my hands. The ribbon was still smooth, cool against my fingers. It felt obscene that something so pretty could have carried something so poisonous. By midnight, I was sitting on the floor in the living room with a cup of tea, staring at the front door, as if he might walk through it at any moment. My mind kept circling the same questions. Did he ever love me? Or was I always just a convenient shield? When had the shift happened? When had I gone from being his wife to being his cover story? Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was fractured, full of images of the marina, the flash of police lights, Mark's eyes, as they realized I'd betrayed him. The next morning, the world outside seemed entirely unaffected. Cars still passed, birds still perched on the wires, neighbors still walked their dogs. I, however, was walking through the remnants of a marriage that now felt like a carefully constructed lie. Harris called before noon. We've got enough to formally charge him, he said. Your part in this is over, at least from a legal standpoint. You'll still be called to testify, but you're no longer a suspect. The words were supposed to feel freeing, but they landed with a dull thud. Thank you, I said, though I wasn't sure what for. Clearing my name was only part of the battle. The rest was untangling myself from 12 years of shared history, shared finances, shared everything. After the call, I made myself a simple breakfast toast and scrambled eggs and sat at the kitchen counter. It struck me how rare it was to eat alone in this house. Even when Mark was away, his presence had been everywhere. The coffee cup left in the sink, the phone charger draped over a chair, the smell of his aftershave lingering in the air. Now there was just me. Olivia came by in the afternoon with a folder. I had my team dig deeper into his accounts, she said. You should see this. Inside were records showing just how deep the rot went offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, payments to shell companies in Dubai, and coded emails to contacts in Antwerp and Hong Kong. "This is the rest of your marriage," Olivia said gently. "All the parts you didn't see." I closed the folder. "I don't know if I can look at it right now. That's fine. But I wanted you to have it. Not just for court, for yourself. You deserve to know the truth, even if it hurts." When she left, I sat there staring at the folder for a long time. Part of me wanted to open it and dissect every lie. The other part wanted to burn it to erase the evidence so I could start over without this weight. That night, I lit a fire in the living room. I didn't burn the folder, not yet, but I did burn the ribbon from the gift box. It curled and blackened in the flames, the silver turning to ash. Watching it disintegrate, I realized something: the silence of betrayal isn't the moment it happens. It's the days after, when the noise fades, and you're left with nothing but the echo of what you thought you had. And in that silence, you have to decide what comes next. For me, it wouldn't be hiding. It wouldn't be disappearing. Mark had taken enough from me. The rest of my life was mine to reclaim. 3 days after Mark's arrest, I thought the worst was behind me. The legal clouds were clearing, the public attention was shifting to him, and for the first time in weeks, I'd managed to drink a cup of coffee without feeling like my insides were coiled wire. Then Olivia showed up at my door, her expression tight, her movements sharper than usual. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I frowned. "What happened?" She set her bag on the counter, pulled out a manila folder, and lowered her voice. "I got you something, but it's going to put both of us in the line of fire if anyone finds out." That was all it took to make the hair on the back of my neck rise. "What is it?" She opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of internal memos from a shipping company one Mark had used dozens of times over the years. The memos detailed suspicious cargo transfers, all marked with initials and codes I recognized from his leather-bound notebook. "I shouldn't have this," Olivia admitted. "A contact of mine in customs slipped it to me. Off the record. If these documents ever see daylight without the right legal shield, someone's going to start asking how you got them." I stared at the pages, the pieces clicking together in my mind. "This proves it, doesn't it? That the shipments were dirty." She nodded grimly. "It's the link between the smuggling ring and Mark's legitimate business. But it's not just the stolen jewelry. These transfers, some of them are marked with other goods, things a lot more dangerous to be associated with. Dangerous how firearms, counterfeit currency, even some substances I'd rather not name until we're sure." I felt a cold wave wash over me. Mark wasn't just a thief. He was tied into something far uglier. I sat down hard at the kitchen table. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because," she said, leaning forward, "I also have a contact in the DA's office who's willing to fast-track your immunity agreement if you give them these documents and testify." I swallowed. "And if I don't?" She exhaled slowly. "Then you're going to spend the next year looking over your shoulder, wondering if someone from that network thinks you know too much. That was the thing about betrayal: once you've been blindsided, you start seeing traps everywhere." "All right," I said finally. "I'll do it. But you need to tell Harris first. I don't want the DA thinking I'm just handing this over without a chain of custody." She smiled faintly. "Already thought of that. Harris is on his way." 15 minutes later, he was sitting at the same table where Mark and I had once shared Sunday brunches. He flipped through the documents, his face unreadable. "This is big," he said at last. "Too big for me to handle alone. I'll have to take it up the chain." "Do it," I told him. "I want this over." But Harris didn't move to put the papers away. Instead, he looked at me carefully. "Claire, I need you to understand something. If you testify with these, you're not just helping put Mark away. You're helping take down people who won't be happy about it. People who have resources." Olivia jumped in. "She'll have protection." Harris's eyes didn't leave mine. "Yes, but protection has limits. Think about that before you commit. I thought about the crimson gift box, the cold click of handcuffs, the way Mark's voice had wrapped lies in silk. And I thought about the nights I'd stayed awake wondering if my life was going to collapse completely. I've already been living with a target on my back, I said. At least this way, I get to aim back. Harris nodded, closing the folder. I'll start the process. But until then, you keep a low profile. No talking to the press. No sudden trips. And if anyone approaches you about this, anyone, you call me immediately. After he left, Olivia stayed behind, pacing the kitchen. You know this could get ugly, right? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. It's already ugly. I'm just done pretending it's not. That night, I double-checked every lock in the house, pulled the curtains tight, and kept my phone within arm's reach. The quiet felt different now, not just the silence of betrayal, but the silence of waiting for the next move. I didn't have to wait long. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. I answered without thinking. A man's voice, low and unfamiliar, slid through the line. You don't know me, Mrs. Whitmore, but I know you. Stop talking to the police. It's the only way you walk away from this. The call ended before I could respond. I sat there in the dark, phone clutched in my hand, every muscle in my body taut. This wasn't just Mark's world bleeding into mine. This was Mark's world coming for me. I didn't sleep after that phone call. I sat on the couch with every light in the house on, watching the shadows under the door frames, as though they might shift into shapes I'd recognize. When the sun finally bled into the living room, it didn't feel like morning. It felt like a pause between rounds in a fight I hadn't chosen. By mid-morning, Olivia was back at my door, her face tight, when she saw the untouched coffee on the table and my rumpled clothes. You didn't sleep, she said. It wasn't a question. I told her about the call word for word. That's not a bluff, she said immediately. They're watching you. Which means we have to move faster. But moving fast meant digging deeper, and that's when the memories began surfacing uninvited. I thought back to when Mark and I first met 12 years ago at a gallery opening. He'd been charming, almost disarmingly, so his knowledge of art precise but never pretentious. He'd talked about his import-export work as though it were an extension of his taste for beautiful things. At the time, I'd found it mysterious. Now I saw it for what it was: the perfect cover for a man who trafficked in things too valuable and too illegal to discuss openly. As I replayed our years together, tiny details began to snag in my mind. The Christmas trip to Antwerp when he insisted on visiting friends while I wandered the markets alone. The way he always paid cash at certain restaurants, slipping thick envelopes from his coat pocket. The packages that arrived in unmarked vans always when I was out, as if by coincidence. I remembered a night 3 years ago when I woke to find him in the study at 3 a.m., whispering into his phone. When I asked about it in the morning, he'd kissed my forehead and told me it was a time zone thing with a supplier in Asia. I'd accepted it. I'd accepted everything. Now I saw it for what it was, not trust, but willful blindness. Olivia interrupted my thoughts. Claire, I'm not trying to scare you, but these people don't leave loose ends. If Mark thinks you're dangerous to him now, others might see you the same way. I rubbed my temples. I'm already dangerous to him. The documents, the marina. They know I've been talking. That's why you need to remember everything she said, leaning forward. Every odd detail, every strange conversation. The more we have, the more we can protect you. I spent the rest of the day with a notebook, writing it all down. Dates, places, even snatches of overheard phrases. At first it felt ridiculous, like trying to piece together a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. But by evening, a pattern started to emerge. The shipments Mark arranged always lined up with his absences. The coded initials in his notebook matched the names of people he'd introduced me to at dinners, people I'd assumed were business partners, not criminals. And then I remembered something that made my stomach turn. 6 months ago, Mark had asked me to bring a locked briefcase to his office downtown because he didn't trust the courier service. I'd carried it through 3 blocks of winter wind, nearly slipping twice on icy sidewalks. He'd been oddly insistent that I not open it. I'd laughed it off as paranoia. Now I was almost certain that briefcase had been part of this same network. I called Harris immediately. I just remembered something that might matter. I said, my voice tight. I told him about the briefcase, about the timing, about Mark's reaction. That's useful, Harris said. It might match with some surveillance footage we have from around that time. If we can tie that delivery to a larger transaction, it strengthens the case. The more I talked, the more I realized how deep I'd been in it without knowing. And that realization brought something unexpected, not just anger, but shame. How many times had I been right there holding the evidence, walking through the logistics of his crimes without asking questions? How many people had I smiled at across dinner tables thinking they were just Mark's clients when they were really his accomplices? By late evening, I had pages of notes. Olivia skimmed them and whistled low. Claire, this is enough to rattle the DA's office, but it's also enough to make the people in these notes nervous. I stared at the list of names. Some of them I barely remembered. Some I knew well enough to recall the way they shook my hand. They're already nervous, I said quietly. That's why I got the call. Before Olivia left, she pressed her phone into my hand. My number's on speed dial. If you hear from anyone at all, you call me first, then Harris. No heroics. I promised, though, I wasn't sure I could keep it. Because the truth was, part of me wanted to see who might show up. Part of me wanted to look them in the eye and let them know I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, as I was locking the back door, my phone buzzed again, another blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. This time there was no voice. Just breathing. Slow, steady, and deliberate. Then a click and silence. It wasn't a warning. It was a reminder. They knew exactly where to find me. The call, with nothing but breathing, stayed with me all night. It wasn't fear exactly, at least, not the kind that makes you want to hide. It was the kind that hardens you, makes you feel like something inside has finally snapped into place. By morning, I knew I was done waiting for the next move. I called Olivia first. She answered on the second ring. Please tell me you didn't get another call. I did, I said flatly. But I'm not calling because I'm scared. I'm calling because I'm done being scared. There was a pause. What are you thinking, Claire? I want to take this all the way. Not just against Mark, against every single person in his network who thinks they can intimidate me into silence. Olivia exhaled sharply. That's not a small decision. It's the only decision, I said. If I keep backing away every time they breathe down my neck, they win. And Mark walks away, with the satisfaction of knowing he broke me. By the time I hung up, I had already made another call to Harris. He didn't sound surprised. I was wondering how long it would take before you decided to fight back. But if we do this, you need to understand something. You're not just a witness anymore. You'll be bait. I let that word sink in. Fine. I'll be bait. But I want him and everyone around him off the board. Harris's plan was simple in theory and dangerous in execution. Use me to draw out the rest of the operation. If Mark's associates believed I was wavering, they might approach me directly, and the police could catch them in the act. To make it believable, I had to play a part I'd never imagined for myself, the desperate, resentful wife, teetering on the edge of betrayal, but willing to be bought. We started small. I accidentally let slip to a mutual acquaintance, someone I knew would carry word back to the right ears, that I was struggling to cover legal fees, that maybe I'd made a mistake talking to the police so much. It worked faster than I expected. 2 days later, an unfamiliar car slowed in front of my house. A man I didn't recognize, mid-40s, sharp suit, watch worth more than my car, knocked on my door. Mrs. Whitmore, he said smoothly. I represent friends of your husband's. They're concerned about the position you're in. I kept my face carefully neutral. Concerned. They think you've been put in a difficult situation. They'd like to help. Financially. Help in exchange for... He smiled thinly. A little discretion, a little forgetting. I heard Harris's voice in my earpiece. Keep him talking. I don't know if I can forget, I said slowly. I've already told the police things. Things about shipments. Names. His smile didn't falter, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. Names can be erased, as can accounts of conversations. If we take care of you, you can take care of us. I crossed my arms. And if I don't? His smile vanished entirely. Then you'll find out how small this city really is. That was the moment I realized I wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. My anger was louder than my fear. I'll think about it, I said, keeping my voice even. When he left, Harris's team followed him. I didn't know then that his arrest was only hours away. All I knew was that the noose around Mark's operation was starting to tighten, but the victory was short-lived. That night, I found an envelope under my front door. No note, just a photograph. It was me sitting at my kitchen table that afternoon, speaking to the man in the suit, taken through the window. Olivia came over immediately when I called. She looked at the photo, her jaw tight. They're telling you they can get close. This isn't about money anymore. It's about control. I'm not giving it to them, I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness of my voice. You're not, she agreed. But they're going to try harder now. I didn't sleep that night either, but this time I wasn't pacing or checking locks. I was at the dining table with my notes, the documents Olivia had given me, and a plan forming in my head. Mark had underestimated me for years. So had everyone in his orbit. They saw me as an ornament, a wife who kept quiet and smiled for photographs. But I was done being quiet. When dawn came, I called Harris again. I'm in this until the end, I said. Whatever it takes. He didn't hesitate. Good. Because the end's coming faster than you think. It started with a single invoice. A plain, unremarkable sheet of paper buried in a folder Olivia had given me weeks earlier. It listed custom jewelry pieces shipped to a boutique in Lisbon, a boutique I knew for a fact didn't exist. At first, it didn't seem like much. Mark had dozens of fake clients. I'd overheard him joke about ghost buyers more than once. But the date on the invoice made my stomach tighten. It was the same week as one of the larger unsolved robberies Harris had mentioned during our early meetings. I called Olivia. I think I found something. She arrived an hour later, coffee in hand, eyes sharp. I laid out the invoice and pointed at the date. Tell me that's not a coincidence. She scanned it, then gave a low whistle. It's not. And look at the shipment weight, 30 kilos for jewelry. That's not just diamonds. That's cash weight. Cash. Or something that needs to move discreetly. Guns. Documents. Contraband. Mark liked to mix product to make tracking harder. The thought that I'd probably handled or been near shipments containing weapons made my skin crawl. We took the invoice to Harris, who studied it for a long moment before looking up. If we can connect this to the shipping logs we already have, we've got a direct line from the robbery to one of Mark's shell companies. That's huge. Where do we start? I asked. Harris leaned back in his chair. You said you went to his office once, right? Carried a briefcase for him. Yes. About 6 months ago. Then we start there. If there's anything left in that office, it'll be under lock and key, and I can't just walk in without probable cause. He gave me a pointed look. But you might be able to get us what we need. The idea of going into Mark's space again made my chest tighten, but I nodded. Tell me what to look for. That night, I drove to the office building. The receptionist recognized me and didn't ask questions, one of the perks of being the wife for so many years. Inside Mark's office, everything looked the same. The heavy mahogany desk, the leather chair with the faint crease where he leaned back during calls, the photo of us from Santorini smiling on a balcony, a smile I now recognized as part of his mask. I started with the desk drawers, finding nothing but pens, old receipts, and a half-empty bottle of scotch. Then I remembered the way Mark favored symmetry, how he always kept the left-hand drawer locked. The key was still in his coat pocket hanging in the closet. I turned it and found a hidden compartment under the file folders. Inside was another leather-bound notebook, this one newer than the one I'd already handed over. The pages were filled with the same coded entries, but there was something else clipped between two pages was a shipping manifest, stamped with the Lisbon boutique's name. I photographed everything and put it back exactly as I'd found it. On my way out, I forced myself not to look over my shoulder. Harris's reaction when I showed him the photos was immediate. This is it. This is the first thread. We pull on this and the rest of the network comes with it. Over the next week, I watched as Harris's team worked quietly, building the chain of evidence. Every new connection traced back to Mark's companies. Every coded entry matched a shipment, and every shipment pointed to something stolen, illegal, or both. The Lisbon invoice wasn't just a coincidence, it was the keystone in a wall Mark had spent years building. And now, brick by brick, it was coming down. But as we moved forward, the pressure around me tightened. The blocked calls started again. Once I found a single red ribbon the same shade as the one from the gift box tied around my front door handle. Olivia wanted me to move into a hotel under an alias. Harris offered protective surveillance, but I refused to run. If they see me leave, they'll think I'm scared, I told them. The truth was, I was scared, but fear had stopped controlling me the day I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting. One night while reviewing old bank statements, I spotted another anomaly, a large deposit from a Hong Kong account just days before the Grant and Levy robbery. It was the same pattern as Lisbon. Harris confirmed that Hong Kong's shipment had been tied to another theft one involving rare watches. That's when it hit me, every client Mark mentioned in casual conversation over the years had been part of this. Every trip, every late-night call. Even our vacations were probably chosen for proximity to deals. It should have made me feel foolish. Instead, it made me furious. Mark had stolen my trust and turned it into a weapon. Now I was taking it back and using it to end him. By the end of that week, Harris told me the case was moving toward indictment. We're not just charging him with the original robbery anymore, he said. We've got smuggling, laundering, and conspiracy stacked up. And with your testimony, he smiled faintly. He's done. The first thread had unraveled more than just the operation. It had unraveled the illusion I'd lived under for over a decade, and I wasn't done pulling. Harris called me just after sunrise. His voice was calm, but I could hear the weight behind it. We've traced another route. This one's different. It doesn't just link to Mark's shell companies. It links directly to a man named Victor Dalka. The name sent a chill through me. I'd met Victor once at a charity auction. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of polished charm that didn't quite hide the steel in his eyes. Mark had introduced him as a partner in logistics, but I'd seen the way Victor scanned the room like a man taking inventory of threats. What does he have to do with this? I asked. Dalka's been on our radar for years. We've never managed to connect him to anything solid until now. Your Lisbon invoice shows his company as the transit carrier, and if he realizes we've got that, he won't take it lightly. I didn't need Harris to explain what that meant. People like Victor didn't just protect their business, they erased threats. Olivia insisted on coming with me to the station that afternoon. Harris laid out the plan we'd follow the Lisbon lead through a secondary contact, someone who'd done business with Victor and might be willing to talk in exchange for leniency. But getting to that person meant showing my face in places I'd only ever been with Mark at my side. It was risky, which meant, of course, that Harris was already expecting me to say yes. We met the contact at a small cafe on the edge of the industrial district, the kind of place where the coffee was strong enough to strip paint, and the booths were positioned so you could see the door at all times. The man, early 50s, wiry with a faded tattoo snaking up his neck, introduced himself only as Leon. His eyes flicked between me and Harris before he spoke. I heard you were Whitmore's wife, he said, his tone flat. Ex-wife, I corrected automatically, though the divorce wasn't final. He smirked. Didn't take you long. I'm not here to banter, I said, leaning forward. I'm here because I know he used my boutique as a front. And I know you were part of some of those shipments. Leon glanced at Harris, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Dalka doesn't like loose talk, Leon said. But he's got a shipment moving next week. Lisbon like before. Except this time, it's not jewelry. What is it? Harris asked. Leon hesitated. Weapons. Military grade. And if you think a stolen necklace made waves, you don't want to see what happens when this gets out. Harris kept his voice even. We need specifics. Dates, routes, manifests. Leon tapped the table. I'll get them. But if Dalka finds out I'm dead? When we left the cafe, Harris was already on the phone with his team setting up surveillance on the docks. I followed Olivia back to her car, the weight of what we'd just heard pressing down on me. This isn't just about Mark anymore, I said quietly. This is bigger than I thought. Olivia didn't sugarcoat it. It's been bigger from the start. You just couldn't see it while you were in it. That night, I went through my notes again, looking for anything that could tie Mark more directly to Victor. I found it in the margins of the older notebook, a single set of initials VD next to a series of numbers that looked like coordinates. I sent a photo to Harris. His reply was immediate. These matched the location of the Lisbon port yard. The dangerous trail was starting to take shape. 2 days later, Leon made good on his word. He handed over a flash drive containing manifests, shipment dates, and a series of coded emails between Mark and Victor. One of them dated just after the Grant and Levy robbery made my stomach turn cargo secure. Wife took delivery without incident. My hands shook as I read it. Mark hadn't just set me up. He'd bragged about it. But there was no time to dwell. The flash drive gave Harris enough to greenlight a joint operation with Customs. They planned to intercept the shipment before it left the port, and they wanted me there in case anyone tried to change the plan. I didn't like it. But I also knew this might be the only chance to end this before someone got hurt. The night of the operation, the docks were a maze of shadows and steel. Harris positioned me in a small observation post overlooking Slip 23, where the cargo was being loaded. From there, I could see the forklifts moving containers like pieces on a chessboard. At 11:42 p.m., a black SUV pulled up. Victor got out. Even at a distance, his presence was unmistakable, the kind of man who could make a crowd part without raising his voice. He spoke briefly to a foreman, then gestured toward the ship. My stomach twisted. That container wasn't just a link in Mark's chain, it was a ticking bomb waiting to cross the ocean. Through the earpiece, I heard Harris give the order. Within seconds, officers swarmed the dock. Victor's men reacted fast, but the police were faster. The container was seized. Victor was handcuffed. And somewhere in a federal holding cell, Mark would soon learn that his empire had just lost its strongest pillar. But as Harris walked me back to the car, his face was set in a grim line. This isn't over, Claire. Taking Dalka off the board will make waves. You need to be ready for the backlash. I nodded, the salt air sharp in my lungs. I've been ready since the day they knocked on my door. The arrest of Victor Dalka hit Mark's network like a stone dropped in still water. The ripples spread fast, and the undercurrent pulled everyone closer to panic. 2 days later, Harris told me the calls between Mark's known associates had tripled. Some were clearly scrambling to cover their tracks. Others were testing the waters to see if they could salvage what was left. And then there was Mark himself. He hadn't reached out to me directly since the marina, but Harris said their wire intercepts caught him mentioning my name twice in coded exchanges. Once was dismissive, she's handled. The second was sharper, almost anxious, if she turns it all falls. He's worried, Harris said, sliding a printed transcript across the table. And when people like Mark get worried, they make mistakes. I studied the page, my finger tracing the words. So, we make him believe I've already made one. Harris smiled faintly. Exactly. We use you as bait again, but this time, he comes to you. The plan was straightforward, at least on paper leak to one of Mark's trusted intermediaries that I was ready to take a deal from the prosecution in exchange for complete immunity. If Mark believed I was about to hand over every detail I knew and every document I had, he might risk coming out of hiding to stop me. Olivia was less enthusiastic. Claire, this is a dangerous man backed into a corner. You're talking about poking the tiger and then turning your back. I'm not turning my back, I said. Harris's team will be there. And if this works, I never have to look over my shoulder again. We set the stage carefully. I made a call to a woman named Julia, one of Mark's oldest friends, though I'd long suspected she was more fixer than confidant. I told her in a voice trembling just enough to sound believable that the DA's office had offered me a deal, that I didn't want to take it, but the pressure was getting too much. Julia played her part well. She sighed sympathetically, told me I needed to protect myself first, and hung up with a promise to see what she could do. Harris didn't even have to confirm she'd call Mark. I knew she would. 2 days later, just after sunset, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. Claire Mark's voice came smooth but tight. We need to talk. I let a beat of silence stretch between us. What about don't play games? Julia told me you're thinking about cutting a deal. I don't know what else to do, I said softly. I can't keep living like this. You don't have to, he said quickly. Meet me. We'll fix it. The meeting place he chose was almost poetic in its arrogance, a private storage facility he'd used for years. I'd been there twice before, both times told it was just inventory. Harris had the location wired in less than an hour. The night of the meet, I wore a wire under a simple sweater, my phone tucked into my pocket in case I needed the panic code Harris had drilled into me. The drive over was a blur of streetlights and the quiet thud of my own heartbeat. Mark was already there when I arrived, leaning against a storage unit door. He looked tired, but not broken still, wearing that same veneer of control as though he believed he could talk me back into line. Claire, he said warmly, almost like the last few months hadn't happened. You look, well. I didn't return the compliment. Why am I here, Mark? He opened the storage unit, revealing a metal table with a thick envelope on it. Because I want to make this right. 50 grand. You take it, you keep quiet, and we both walk away from this. I stared at the envelope. Walk away to what you still facing charges me, still looking over my shoulder. His eyes narrowed. It doesn't have to be like that. I can make this go away. But I need your word. You won't talk to Harris, the DA, anyone. I tilted my head. Why? What's in here that you're so afraid of? Mark gave a short, humorless laugh. You think you're in control here? You're not. I built this life. I built you a life. And all I asked was for you to keep your mouth shut. That's where you made your mistake. I said, my voice steady. You thought I'd rather live in your shadow than tell the truth. His expression shifted, the first crack in his composure. If you do this, Claire, there's no going back. There's nothing to go back to, I said. The line in my ear crackled. That's enough. Move in. Before Mark could react, the sound of boots on concrete filled the space. Harris's team emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn, voices firm. Mark froze, his eyes darting between me and the officers. You... He started, but the rest was lost as they pulled his hands behind his back and read him his rights. As they led him out, his gaze found mine one last time. It wasn't pleading. It wasn't even angry. It was the look of a man finally realizing he'd underestimated the wrong person. I didn't look away. 2 days after the sting at the storage facility, Harris called. We're transferring Mark to federal custody tomorrow morning, he said. He's requested to see you before he goes. The request caught me off guard. Why? Harris didn't speculate. Could be he wants to explain himself. Could be he wants to rattle you one last time. It's your choice. Every instinct told me to say no, to let the last image I had of him be the one where the cuffs snapped shut. But there was a knot in my chest I hadn't been able to untangle since that night at the marina. The truth was, Part of me needed to hear it from him. "All right," I said finally. "I'll see him." The meeting was arranged in one of the small interview rooms at the station, the same kind where I'd once sat as the accused. This time, the tables were turned. When I walked in, Mark was already seated, hands cuffed in front of him. He looked different. Not weaker exactly, but stripped of the quiet swagger that had always clung to him. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His hair was a little longer, his jaw rougher. "Claire," he said almost warmly, "you look better than I expected." I took the seat across from him. "Let's skip the pleasantries." He tilted his head, studying me. "I wanted to see you well, because you were better at this than I thought you'd be." "This?" I asked. "You mean surviving you?" His lips curved, but there was no real humor there. "Surviving me, beating me out, playing me, call it what you want." "I didn't think you had it in you." I leaned forward. "Then why did you set me up? Why plant that necklace in my home? Was it just to save your own skin? Or did you actually want me out of the way?" For the first time, he looked away. "It was about time. You were asking questions. Little ones, but enough. If they took you in for questioning, you'd have to explain, and you're a terrible liar." The words hit harder than I expected. "So instead of protecting me, you turned me into bait." "I protected the business," he said, meeting my eyes again. "That's what mattered." "That's what mattered to you," I shot back. "You didn't care what happened to me. You just wanted to buy yourself time." Mark's voice stayed calm, but I saw the flicker of irritation. "You think I built all of this by letting emotions get in the way? You married me because I could give you a life you couldn't build on your own. You enjoyed it. You enjoyed me, until it was convenient not to." I stared at him, letting the silence stretch. "You're right about one thing, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed believing I had a husband who loved me. Turns out I had a partner in a crime I didn't even know I was part of." He smirked faintly. "And now you've turned into the kind of person who would hand over her own husband." I didn't blink. "No. I turned into the kind of person who would stop protecting someone who never protected her." For a long moment, we just looked at each other. The man across from me was the same Mark I'd lived with for 12 years, but he was also a stranger, someone I'd never truly seen until the gift box, the necklace, the arrest. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "They'll lock me up, but not forever. When I get out, you won't find me," I said, cutting him off. "You won't find where I live, who I talk to, what I'm doing. The world you built is already falling apart, Mark. By the time you get out, there won't be anything left for you to reclaim." His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Harris stepped into the room, then glancing at me. "Time's up." I stood, keeping my eyes on Mark for one last moment. "Goodbye, Mark." I walked out without looking back. The door closed behind me, and with it, something in my chest finally eased. I didn't have every answer, but I had enough to stop replaying the questions in my head, enough to let the anger cool into something quieter. The man I'd married was gone. Maybe he'd never really existed at all. But I was still here. And I was free. The morning of Mark's transfer, the air felt different, sharp, almost electric. When I arrived at the station, the street outside was already lined with news vans. Reporters clustered near the entrance, their cameras poised, their voices pitched for the live broadcasts. It struck me then, for months, this had been my private nightmare. Now it was about to become everyone's morning headline. Inside, Harris was waiting. He'll be moved under federal escort. They want to keep it clean. No theatrics. I raised an eyebrow. The press outside is going to make that impossible. Harris gave a faint shrug. He wanted the life. This is part of the price. Through a narrow window in the holding corridor, I saw Mark being led out in shackles. He was flanked by 2 federal marshals, his head held high, jaw set. If not for the jumpsuit, you might have thought he was walking into a boardroom instead of a prison transport. The marshals opened the side door that led to the waiting van, but the reporters caught sight of him instantly. "Mark, did you set your wife up? Do you have anything to say about the stolen goods? Claire, do you feel vindicated?" That last one hit me like a small jolt. I hadn't planned to be seen. Harris had advised against it, but somehow the reporters knew I was there. When Mark heard my name, he turned his head toward the window. His eyes found mine, and for a heartbeat it was like everything else fell away. The noise, the cameras, the years of lies. There was no anger in his face this time, no smugness, just resignation. The marshals guided him into the van, the door shut, and the engine roared to life. Just like that, he was gone, not into hiding this time, but into a system that would hold him for a very long time. Harris came to stand beside me. "It's done. The DA's office is moving forward with the full charges. With your testimony, the Lisbon and Hong Kong cases will stick. He won't see the outside of a prison yard for decades." I nodded, but my chest felt hollow. I thought I'd feel more. Closure isn't fireworks, Claire. Sometimes it's just the quiet after the storm. The press was still outside when I left the station, cameras, flashing voices calling my name. I didn't stop, didn't give a statement. This wasn't their story to dissect, not the parts that mattered anyway. Back home, the house felt both emptier and lighter. I walked from room to room, noticing things I hadn't before. The way the light fell across the dining table in the late morning, the quiet hum of the refrigerator without the TV blaring in the background, the space in the closet where his suits had hung. I made tea and sat by the window. From here, the world looked ordinary again. People walked their dogs, kids rode bikes. The mailman made his rounds. No one looking in would know what had happened behind my door or how close I'd come to losing everything. The phone rang just after noon. It was Olivia. "It's over," she said. "The feds took him. I saw the paperwork myself. You're in the clear completely." "Thank you," I said. "You don't have to thank me. You did most of the heavy lifting." After we hung up, I realized she was right. This ending hadn't been handed to me. I'd clawed my way to it piece by piece, truth by truth. And even though it didn't feel like a victory parade, it was still a win. Later that evening, I opened the drawer where I'd stashed the folder of Mark's accounts, contacts, and shipments. I'd kept it all not out of spite, but because I wanted to remember. Not the pain, but the proof that I'd made it through. I slid the folder into a fireproof box and locked it away. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the house fell into that familiar quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel like the silence of betrayal. It felt like space, room to breathe, room to decide what came next. Mark was gone, and for the first time in years, I was truly alone in my own life. The day after Mark's transfer, I woke before sunrise. For months, my mornings had been dictated by anxiety phone calls from Harris, meetings with Olivia, restless hours of combing through memories for details that might save me. But this morning was different. There was no list waiting for me, no deadline hanging over my head. Just stillness. I made coffee and carried it out to the porch. The air was cool, the sky painted in streaks of pale gold. I sat there feeling the mug warm my hands and realized something that should have been obvious: I was free. But freedom, I discovered, isn't always a rush. Sometimes it's quiet, almost fragile, like a bird that might startle and fly away if you move too quickly. I still had the scars, the whispers from neighbors, the lingering questions from acquaintances who didn't know the full story but thought they did. The moments in the middle of the night when I'd jolt awake convinced I heard a car idling outside. Those things might fade, but they would never completely disappear. And maybe that was the point. When you live through something that strips you down to your bones, you don't come out the same. The scars aren't just reminders of pain, they're proof that you survived. Later that morning, Olivia stopped by. She looked different too, more relaxed maybe now that the fight was over. She handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Your official clearance from the DA's office," she said. Every charge dropped. Your name is clean. I ran my thumb over the paper, feeling the weight of what it meant. Thank you, I said softly. Olivia smiled. Now you get to decide what comes next. And whatever it is, it's yours, not his. After she left, I walked through the house slowly, room by room. The spaces that had once felt tainted by his presence now felt like a blank canvas. The dining table, the kitchen, even the bedroom, all of it belonged to me again. I opened the closet and looked at the empty space where his suits used to hang. It was strange that gap had once felt like a wound, but now it felt like breathing room. I didn't want to fill it with something else right away. I wanted to leave it open to remind myself that not everything empty needs to be replaced. That evening, I took the crimson ribbon from the gift box, the one I'd kept in a drawer instead of burning, and carried it out to the backyard. The grass was damp with dew, the air cool against my skin. I lit a match and held the ribbon over the flame until it caught curling into ash in my palm. When it was gone, I let the wind take what was left. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about Mark. It was about letting go of the last piece of the trap he'd set for me. As the smoke drifted upward, I thought about all the women and men who've stood where I stood, trapped by someone they trusted, made to carry the weight of someone else's crimes, silenced by fear or shame. If I'd learned anything, it was this: the moment you start telling the truth, even if your voice shakes, even if no one believes you at first, is the moment the walls start to crack. I didn't know exactly what I'd do next. Maybe I'd pour myself into my boutique, rebuild my business without the shadow of his name. Maybe I'd leave this house and start somewhere new, somewhere no one knew the story unless I chose to tell it. But I knew one thing for certain: I'd never again let anyone decide my life for me. When the stars came out, I sat on the porch again, this time, with the comfort of knowing the worst was behind me. The world was still the same: neighbors, walking dogs, the faint sound of traffic in the distance, but I wasn't. I'd been framed, arrested, threatened, and betrayed. And I was still here. That was my victory. And if anyone ever tried to take it from me again, well, they'd find out just how much fight I had left.